What's up, guys? Welcome to another edition of Before the Whistle, presented by BRK Insurance Group. If your business is looking for the best in employee benefits, commercial property and casualty insurance, or retirement and 401k plan services, there's no one better suited to meet your challenges and build a plan centered around your needs than BRK Insurance Group. What's up, y'all? Welcome again back to Before the Whistle. I'm your host, Maddy. I usually have been having a guest on these Friday episodes, especially these Tulane players as we're looking forward to the draft, but also covering this current Tulane team at the same time. And this current Tulane team, we're in the process of spring practice. We're probably halfway, if not more than halfway through it, with the second scrimmage coming this weekend. But I structured my episodes a little differently this week just because we did have that Saturday scrimmage, and it just kind of felt like we really needed to see guys just go pad to pad against one another to really get some answers about this team, any competitions here and there, and just see what the flow, the tempo, and the identity of this team that we can be looking towards. And I think you got a really good picture of that as I broke down on my Tuesday episode from this weekend's scrimmage. So I went into this week kind of wanting to see if anything jumped out as noticeably different than last week based on the scrimmage. And to be honest with you, not that much in terms of getting exact answers about a depth chart, although I think you can see guys that went with the ones in the scrimmage that are still remaining like that throughout this week of practice. Some things that you're seeing with guys just coming back from injury. Now that Keith Brown is injured, it gives an opportunity for another guy or two to step up. And I know that everyone wants to talk about the quarterback competition, but no one's really pulled away this week. That's just kind of sometimes how practice goes. But I think you got a good snapshot on Saturday, and you're starting to see now, I think, just a different level of competition take place. I think for a lot of these guys, some of them are high school students, some of them are transfer guys. A lot of them haven't really had that much experience playing football in a game setting. And yes, the scrimmage is not exactly the same thing, but they were hitting like it was. And well, there's that much competition really going on among these position groups for these starter roles and the ones and the twos for that matter, as well as the three-man depth chart. Really nothing's set in stone yet. So it's been intriguing to watch this week. I'm going to break it down on today's show. To be totally honest, guys, I got about 10 minutes into that, and then my internet just ended on me for no reason and didn't save any of that. So I'm going to try to get back to where I was with that. 'Cause I haven't really taken down that many notes this week per se. I came into this week after the scrimmage not necessarily expecting that much to change, just because I think it was your really first opportunity to see what this team just competes like, and if there are guys that really benefit from that competitiveness a little more than other guys. There's a reason that spring camp is 4 weeks long and that there's 3 scrimmages. And I don't think that you're really going to see that much change this week. There's things that I was looking for, like Patrick Jenkins was someone that I noticed they had put at defensive end during the scrimmage. And it's a very different skill set. It was one that he flashed in, but at the end of the day, the trenches are just not really one that you can glean that much from until you actually get to the season. It's just really the nature of the position. Same with the running backs for that matter. And so you saw him flash there, but you weren't for sure. And so now Angelo Anderson, who was hurt, is back at that role. And you're starting to see some guys start to flash at opposite that with Matthew Fobbs-White making a play today. It was a hard hit at that on one of the running backs. He kind of slammed him down and it got a little chippy. It got a little chippy more than once at practice today. And I just think that that's really a byproduct of them finally getting the ball on the ground and just playing some football. And all these position groups, a lot of them have a lot of competition going on within them. But I think you're kind of wanting to see the competition amongst the team. And that to me was something that really made a jump this week. It's been interesting because past scrimmages, A, I haven't had this podcast, and B, there's been some things that have changed. There's been some things to really pay attention to. Having the same quarterback all 3 seasons makes all of the difference. Having the same head coach all 3 seasons. My first year, I wasn't there for the spring. I wasn't hired until July of that year. So I've only had 2 spring practices at this point. And they've all really showed me a lot about what the team is going to be looking like heading into the fall. You could really see that this 2-10 team was not that same team in the spring before they ended up winning the Cotton Bowl. I know that they were talking about the conference championship and people heard that in fall camp in July and August, but was hearing it back February, March of that year really loudly from these guys. And it made me believe them watching the way that they worked throughout that spring camp. Last year, I guess there was just kind of the expectation that the standard of success was there, to be honest. So you were looking at who's replacing Tajay Spears, who's replacing Nick Anderson and Dorian Williams. But for the most part, you had a lot more continuity at a lot of those roles. And this season is just completely different. It's not my first season with a new coaching staff or a new team, because ultimately my first year was that. But this is my first season since then that it's really been this different. There was things that you could see, just like the tempo and the way that the offense has been set up. Just you can start to see the identity really come out in those scrimmages. But at the end of the day, it still is just that one scrimmage. And I think that there are position groups that benefit from that more than others. And I think you can get some answers somewhere. You're not going to get that many answers elsewhere. You look at, for example, the offensive line, and yeah, they've been performing well, but there's been some injuries. There's been not really that answer at left tackle. And so they have this guy, Ronan Chambers, I am sorry if it's Akron or Akron. You can crucify me for whichever wrong way to pronounce that. But him coming over, I think, just shows really how much experience matters. With the idea that pretty much he's going to probably slot in and compete for that left tackle role. And you've just seen the way that Vincent Murphy really came in as another transfer and just solved the center problem relatively quickly for this team. And he's really fit in seamlessly. And you look at the guys like Cameron Wire and people that have transferred over that have that playing time, it does just make a difference. So, you've heard them say they want to address an offensive tackle, they want to address edge, they want to address cornerback. Some of those positions are just newer than others. Cornerback is really the one that you see the least experience at. And that's something that John Sarmal has been upfront about. And I think it's something that, for me at least, I saw a noticeable jump in that position group throughout this week, as I think a result of playing in that scrimmage. Just going through the scouting academy, learning what goes into that position group and how difficult it really is, how much film study really is required to go into it, and how much technique and things like that matter. Something that sticks out, Jai Eugene Jr. spent a lot of time at quarterback in high school and cornerback, but a lot of schools, these guys end up playing quarterback, and I love saying those words together, quarterback on the offense, because there really just isn't one at their school, and high schools aren't really like developing quarterbacks. So I think it was Lance Robinson. It was one of the guys I've talked to recently that played quarterback for high school. There's just a lot of guys that end up having that happen. But if you're not naturally playing that defensive back position the entirety of your time, it's a difficult one to just be able to all of a sudden do. He played some of that in high school, but it's one of those groups where you have to know how a receiver is going to move, and then you have to mirror them backwards. And that's just really bizarre body movement, especially if you really haven't done it that much before, where you're starting out backpedaling based on the way a receiver moves, and you have to flip your hips correctly based on the way they declare their route. If you don't do those one couple of things correctly, receivers 10 yards downfield, and you're kind of screwed. So it's one of those that just so fundamentally, technically sound is required. And a lot of that comes from experience, but it's also a position to me that is very emotional, and for good reason. It's one of those things where you're going to get burned at that position. You're going to have completions allowed on you and eventually allow a touchdown. It's just the nature of football. And you feel a little more responsible for that when it's your one-on-one assignment. But are you able to really just put that in the back of your mind and move on from it? That's kind of where those emotions happen. But I think you haven't seen that much emotion out of that group because they're really just still trying to get their feet wet. And I think you could say that about a few of the positions, including quarterback, just continuing to do this, where you could just see it on all three of those guys. And you're I think starting to see a little more growth from them, but they're still making mistakes. But I think back to the Senior Bowl where I went down there to watch Michael Pratt, and on the first day, he did look just a little bit reserved. And it was something that, I know the type of leader he can be. So I personally was hoping to kind of see more out of him as the week went on. And immediately that jumped out. Just anyone that knows Michael Pratt, the way guys gravitate towards him, he's such a natural leader. But for someone like that, it just struck me how much information they have to all of a sudden keep down. And get this chemistry going with these receivers that they don't know, they've never played with before. And all the while, all these scouts are evaluating them. And so the first day, I think you're just trying to get the information down and then be yourself. And you immediately saw that with Michael Pratt. But I think you're seeing that with a lot of these guys where they're just trying to get the information correct at this point, and it's not always there. But then you want to eventually see some inclinations of that emotion, of that leadership, of some of those traits. And I wouldn't say that any quarterback this week really moved the pegs one way or another. Ty Thompson got a little more time practicing today than other days, but I just don't think that it's worth it. It's not even worth it. It's just there's not really anything to read into at this point. It's a process that I think would be short-sighted to play out. We left the scrimmage with John Summerall saying that it was a three-headed quarterback race. And could some of that be coach speak? Could some of that be just trying to get the two guys that are presumed to be in that battle going? It could be, but with none of these guys actually having long-term really starting experience, Kai Horton just having a couple games, 4 games, and then the one that he came in for Houston, they're pretty much all in square one in terms of that. And so I don't think that it would be wise to count someone like that out, but you haven't really seen that race necessarily illuminate itself. But I also don't think that it's one that is worth picking apart on a daily basis. I think that the body of work ultimately at the end is going to be what you're able to evaluate and look back on. But it's different when it's a veteran quarterback in the second week of spring practice making the wrong reads. It's a completely other story when it's guys that don't have that experience really under center in a game setting that are all in a new offense and are all battling for this role. It's just, that's why context really matters. But that's also kind of why I just stopped charting this week. I just really wanted to see what the vibes were, what the identity of this team is looking like, because I think that you can start to stack on as these scrimmages go on. So some of the depth chart things, I think you could see if that's still the case in the second scrimmage, get some answers and feel like that is a little bit solidified and start really building on that body of work to be able to look at this team from a depth chart perspective. But for me, I just kind of have wanted to get a sense of what the feel is like and who those leaders are going to be, where the emotions are really going to kind of come from. And today was a chippy, excuse me, I am very dehydrated. It's easy to hear a promo in the middle of a podcast and think, of course they like the product, they're paid to. Well, if you know me at all, then you know 2 things. 1, I'm truthful, almost to a fault. And 2, if I were in it for the money, I'd be doing something else. So believe me when I say that I love Blue Oak Barbecue. The food, the drinks, the people, the location, yes, all of that. Blue Oak Barbecue has a great selection of your favorites from the smoker, fantastic sides, and awesome bar specials each and every week. I tried pretty much an array of them as I went there this last week. So go ahead and check them out. Blue Oak Barbecue, located at 900 North Carrollton Avenue here in New Orleans, or visit them online at blueoakbarbecue.com. And we do have something exciting going on at in the works there at Blue Oak Barbecue, which is why I was there this weekend or this past week. So more on that to follow, but I will just continue to attest to MJ Lloyd's bartender skills and frankly, just all of the menu there at Blue Oak. But I got your specials here for the rest of the week for this lovely month of April. So we are on Friday, got your classic shrimp po' boy, and Saturday you have a smoked sirloin, and Sunday a croque madame, if you will. So go get your specials over at Blue Oak Barbecue. I'm sorry, it is truly always something, and I almost spit my water all over my keyboard with that coughing fit. So I'm glad that I paused and resumed here. But back to what I was saying about the team being chippy, and while you'll be able to gain some answers from a depth chart perspective as these scrimmages kind of settle on, you also want to see the personality of a team really take fold as well. And from what I've seen, I think that there is bad chippiness. I think there's good chippiness. I was a chippy player. There are times where it's better to get the emotions high. And when you look at the context, where just, some guy gets kind of slammed down, not in the worst way, but in a way that when you've just been battling all day long, it's just easy to kind of get wrapped up in things. And there was one where, there was a catch made in the end zone. They thought it was in bounds. It wasn't in bounds, and just kind of getting back and forth about it. You want these guys to care. And want to be kind of fighting for these positions. So I really liked the fight that we saw out of these guys today. I thought you saw a little bit of just the scrimmage hangover to be honest with you, on Tuesday. These guys were hitting hard on Saturday. Like it was a real game hitting hard. And when you haven't been hit like that in a while, it just, your body has to kind of get back to it. And some guys got, a little banged up here and there. But today, I thought you saw one group in particular for me made that jump at cornerback. And I thought that Jai Eugene Jr. and Lou Tillery both stood out today in a good way. There were some plays where even though the catch was made by the receiver, I was impressed that they were that close, that in phase, that if you could just get them a snap faster on that, then they're able to affect the play. Because when they were there, these guys are hitting hard enough that it's forcing incompletions. And that's where stuff was kind of getting a little chippy today. But you saw some personality come out of those guys, and that's super important at that position. And I think once that personality gets unlocked out of you, you think back to Jarius Monroe and how just confident he was in himself and how much he would tell you it. And that really matters a lot of the time. So that was something. And Jaden Lewis, who is a guy that is coming in from this high school class, he's not even on the roster. But it got to the point where multiple of us were saying, who's number 31 out there? Because he's making plays too. And I think I finally tracked down our GM, Cole Hurd, and he told me, it might have been Courtney Luquette who told me that. But we were all kind of clamoring to know, because the defense to me won the day today. And I think that that's good to see in a practice setting, because you don't want them to win the day all the time in a scrimmage. But I think after that scrimmage where it was a little healthy back and forth competition, you're still wanting to see a little bit out of these quarterbacks. So having this defense kind of step up and make them all have difficult days, but some of them are, there's still kind of those mistakes where it's a great throw, and then the next throw, you're kind of like, what's going on here? So it is a learning process, but it's one that I've enjoyed covering. And the way that I kind of want to end this is, it's a little odd of a segue, but I ended up actually speaking to a class today at Tulane after practice. Michelle Adams, who is one of the professors at Tulane, she's at all of the Tulane games. She's such a huge supporter of the Green Wave. For the Faculty Appreciation Day, she came and led the Green Wave chant. She asked me to come speak with her class. And, Amanda was there from the staff. And then there was 4 players that were there: Patrick Jenkins, Dante Fleming, Michael Lunds, and Angelo Anderson. And talking about my experience as a sideline reporter and what it's been like covering these guys, and what it's felt like perhaps being different covering college versus the NFL. And something about having these guys in front of me as I just kind of was speaking on, wanting to really fight for the guys on this team. And it's different on this side of things, where when I was covering football from the Saints perspective, the draft was, oh, this is exciting. Who are the Saints going to draft? Now I'm on this side, and I'm just realizing how much of these guys' lives get affected by this. And why I think you can be more critical in a professional setting, because those are 30-something-year-old adults at the end of the day. And they're not all 30, but they're adults, and this is their full-time job, and they have made the dream happen. Something like 0.07% of college football players make it to the NFL. So those guys have achieved the dream that is almost unachievable. But all of these guys in college are in the middle of chasing their dreams, and all of the stressors that come with that. They're also student athletes at the same time, as evidenced by the fact that all 4 of them are in this class as I'm talking today, all extremely attentive, and, saying that I did a good job afterwards, giving me a round of applause. It really does mean a lot. It's not something I ever expected to be giving, these, because I'm still trying to figure out what I'm doing, and it feels weird giving advice, especially when my path to this role was just so chaotic. But that really just makes me so grateful for what I do. And it just reminded me, talking with these guys, that at the end of the day, this really is, it is football, but it's about a lot of these guys who have just moved here. They're just getting acclimated. A lot of the guys have lost their teammates. They missed the guys from last year. There's some guys that are in their final year of eligibility, and they're fighting for that spot with a coaching staff they're still getting to know. Just it put me back in perspective that at the end of the day, these are just kids. They're kids that have probably gone through more in 4 years than a lot of us in a college setting will, in 1 year, that we'll go through in 4 years, just in terms of what they have to balance, all the stressors, all of the travel, all of that. But at the end of the day, they're still 18 to 24 years old. Some of them, as Coach Summerall has pointed out, should be at prom right now. And they're out here battling for these positions. And so, to a point, it's important, obviously, to give these updates, but every practice isn't necessarily going to give all of this information. And for me, it just was really cool to be able to talk about that. But it reminds me that just a lot of these guys are fighting for a lot here. And, while I report on this, I'm also the sideline reporter. And a large part of that to me is being supportive of them. So it's been a pleasure really finding my voice throughout covering this and figuring out a way to give this information to fans to, be really good at all these kind of different hats that I'm wearing. But I think that while I might have thought more answers would come this week, I just think that you're seeing the makings of a team get built from a little bit of scratch. And for what we've seen thus far, it's really good. You look at some of the inexperience, but you also look at them starting to make those jumps as the weeks go on. And I think, especially with spring break, just kind of being in the middle of practice, it does kind of just separate it in a way that it might not matter that much if these guys weren't all, collectively behind the 8 ball than some of these teams that are used to being with one another. But truncating it like that, I think just kind of, you had that lull. And so you're seeing a little more of that fight and a little more of that push today and this week for that matter. But it's just the competition in each group has felt healthy. You feel like wide receiver, every snap these guys are playing is like their last. And for a lot of them, it is, for Dante Fleming, for example, who made some good plays today. This is his final year of eligibility. And you can just see a little bit of that want. And you can see the same thing in Fat Watts, who's made some really good plays. But you can see a lot of that in these newcomers as well. Shaz Preston, guys that came over from these bigger programs, Mario Williams, who I think you can confidently slot. He looks fantastic every single day of practice at that role. But I think for a lot of these guys, it's a fresh start and it's a second chance at playing the game that they love. And it's just been a pleasure for me to really follow along with their journey. So I know that you guys aren't able to attend these practices and are looking kind of for these depth charts and this information, but I don't want to be rash and name something where these guys are, again, just all still trying to figure out the playbook at this point. So, we have a practice tomorrow, then we have a scrimmage on Saturday, and you want to feel good about a lot of these spots going into that spring game. So the stakes are going to be higher this weekend. And I think you'll just continue to see that build upon effect. But the worst thing that you would see would be a lull or a step backwards or feeling like they were checked out. And to me, it's been just the complete antithesis of that. The energy has been there. The competitiveness has been there. But when the offense and defense are getting after it with one another, you also kind of start to fight alongside your unit. And that bonds, guys. It's all a weird, violent sport that bonds these guys together. And it was really cool to say that, take an extra step this week and see what that leads into this weekend.